Today I shall continue to speak of the temple, and end by giving you a description of a Yanihian home. In case of misunderstanding, I wish to explain that the vase of the green bough refers to the color green as we had it in Yanini, not the rather ugly color of yours now. You will remember that this vase was on the stone of worship. Another point that I wish to make clear, there was a large opening between the great hall of the temple and the inner temple, a type of door, through which the initiates could see the inner temple clearly. You may have imagined that it was shut off. This was not so. To continue with the temple rites, I will describe to you today the initiation into the 1st, 6th, and 12th rites. The first rite, the rite of pre-initiation, was, of course, the most simple of all, and the least trying to the neophyte. This rite, under the domination of the 4th ray, the Hakan ray, admitted the neophyte to the company of initiates. For this ceremony he wore his, or her, usual robe of white or blue. He proceeded after a period of 60 hours of meditation. He proceeded alone, I say, through the temple hall, right up to the opening door of the inner temple. Here his overlord awaited him, with a covering for the head made of landhill, a substance resembling your cellophane. This transparent covering was placed over the face and head, and he was led by the hand up to me, at the stone of worship. Then I placed my hands upon his head, then the shoulders, then the heart, and finally the feet. And finally, a large circle was circumscribed around him in the ether, thus he became immersed in the sign of the cross and circle. Footnote: the cross and circle is the true consecrated symbol of the earth planet, the suffering earth surrounded with the all-encircling love of God. The plain cross and crucifix should never be worn or shown. The Josiam ray, in a diluted form, then played upon the cranium, covering the seat of all knowledge and wisdom, the pineal gland. This lasted for a short period only, and after receiving a sip of water from the bowl of God, the newly made initiate returned to his waiting brethren. This was the completion of the first rite. I shall pass over the others for the present to describe the 6th rite next, the halfway of initiation into the mysteries. During this rite, the first of the 6 rays, I mean from the 1st to the 6th, were brought into direct contact with the initiate. This time, he or she was escorted from the main temple entrance by 6 of his or her brethren, and they were met by me at the entrance to the inner temple. Here the initiate stripped off his own robe and donned one of a silvery material. He then stood alone, while the temple was darkened, by the inversion of the light rays. We, the adepts, were permitted to do this for these rites only. For 3 hours the initiate stood alone in the darkness, whilst I and my dear ones concentrated on him in thought, and contacted the solar logos on his behalf. Then, at the words Doc Grunrat, the darkness was immediately dispelled, and the first 6 cosmic rays came into play over the stone of worship. Can you conceive of the glorious sight, for to the whole temple of peoples it was seen, of a gigantic rainbow over the whole of the inner temple, flickering with diamond-like facets of brilliant light, where the essence atoms of the 6 rays solidified in their contact with the ascending thought forms of the rite, thoughts of love for the initiate. This ray rainbow shimmered there for about 1 whole hour, and as it faded the initiate slowly advanced to the steps of the stone and cast himself upon his face in utter adoration of the intense love of the Great One. The silver robe was then removed, and in its place one of blue shot with green was placed, covering head as well as body. Then there followed a period of trance, while the great body of initiates in the hall breathed their prayer sighs up to the logos. After a time, the entranced initiate spoke, and he addressed his brethren upon the solar mysteries, for these were only learned and spoken of under trance conditions. They were too sacred to be otherwise. Footnote: here is written proof, if it be needed, that only through Yanihian and solar trance can the truths of God be given, not hypnotism as was practiced by a corrupt priesthood in many of the Egyptian dynasties. Upon returning from trance he was clothed again in the silver robe, and left the temple a new member of the 6th initiatory rite. This was usually known as the Rite of Darkness. Your Masons have one which faintly resembles it, the complete darkness. The 12th, and final rite, was one of great rejoicing, and one for which every man and woman waited with loving expectancy. It began at dawn, after the first contact of the dawn. The initiate arose very early, and bathed himself in the water which flowed from a stream whose source was under the temple. He then donned a tunic of white shimmering material, and over that a cloak of blue, studded all over with precious stones. Round his head was bound the white band of the logos, with the golden sun in the center. He proceeded to the temple doors and knocked 12 times on the outside. The 12 female children admitted him, and led him forward to the stone of worship, where I awaited him. Here, after a period of time during which I gazed into his eyes, you earth people refer to it as hypnotism, he then passed into deep trance, and under this trance condition was derobed and placed, quite naked, on the stone of worship. Footnote: pure trance is operated from high spirit and is not conditioned by the medium through self-induced piety and emotion. A few moments of intense silence, then a great sigh arose from the hearts of his brethren, and at the expiration of the sigh, there arose such a glorious song of thunder from the skies above, the concentrating of the 12 cosmic rays. At the shout of the word Jesus, the rays rushed through the aperture above the stone, straight down and into the body of the sleeping initiate. This baptism continued for 2 hours, and has suddenly ceased. The initiate awoke, literally vibrating with these solar essences, and after a period of prostration, in adoration, but also due in part to nerve exhaustion, he then arose and returned to his home. These homes, all similar in design having all been born from the same thought process, were made of a white woody substance, beaten into sheets by the clenched fists. There were 4 rooms in each house, with the small hypocaust under the ground level for the purpose of conservation of the warmth of the magnetic rays. There were no windows, only small apertures cut in the walls. The floors were covered with sweet-smelling herbs, and the beds were covered in similar way. The older members of families occupied the 2 largest rooms, and the younger ones the others. I shall refrain from going into any more description of this today and shall leave it for next time. One more small thing. In your little handwork shop there is a ring which has a white stone in the center and blue ones around it, chalcedony. I want you to look well at this, for it is exactly similar in design and color to that worn by every Yanihian man and woman. They wore them as a type of vademecum, a carrier of goodness, and in each ring, behind the white stone, there was conserved a sort of little pocket of a troom. Go and look on it. May God bless you.